Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 232, yes I got the number right, of Retropower and Cut. And we're here, the sun is shining behind Jamie outside, it's a beautiful day, it's been a lovely week. Lots of sunshine, very pleasant, and we're here in the workshop, not in the sunshine, but surrounded by all sorts of very cool projects. So we're going to briefly touch on the scimitar project, which you haven't seen for a while. I've been trying to get some time to work on it. I've been struggling, if I'm honest, because of juggling a lot of other things. We've got a lot going on, which will transpire over the coming weeks. But there's a lot of things going on. There's just running a business things going on in the background, which have absorbed quite a lot of time. One of which is the parts control system that we are putting in place, which I think Cal will allude to and probably go into further detail on in the future, so I'm not going to now. However, that has been absorbing time. We actually did a bit of a training day earlier in the week on that Cal had organised. But I have managed to get a little bit of time in on this. This was actually Friday of last week, just after we shot last week's video. Because really, for the next phase of this project, we need to have the body shell on the chassis in its roughly final position, so we can work out how we're going to build the structure of the car. We've just got to design a car. So we needed this body shell in place on the chassis so we can work out exactly how we're going to do the structure, because we're not going to be using the same structure as the scimitar originally had, i.e. a big fiberglass lunchbox dropped on top of a ladder frame chassis. We're using a backbone chassis, which is not that dissimilar to the original scimitar one. It's a lot stronger, it's a lot more torsionally stiff, but it is still a steel chassis underneath. And we're going to be having a carbon fibre body to go on top of that, but obviously the bits that go in between are quite key, and building a structure to make all that work. So in order to do that, I needed to get it to the position where we could put this original scimitar body in place on the chassis so that we could align things and work out the relative positions of everything and start to work on the design of the new body. In terms of, obviously we've got an idea of the outer shape of the new body, but what we haven't got is the design of the structural parts, the inner parts of that replacement body. So we're going to be, in order to do that, I've placed the body on. In order to get to that stage, there's a couple of little steps up to that, which was that the inside of this was pretty revolting. It had been savaged by time and weather. So the interior of the car was quite unpleasant, and there was a lot of varying fibrous material hanging from the inside of that, which I didn't fancy my chances with, I have to say. I have no idea what it was. I don't think there's any asbestos in there, but I'm fairly sure it wasn't pleasant, and it certainly looked itchy. So I wanted to get rid of all that, and the best way seemed to be the jet wash. So I got the body shell outside, jet washed all that out, got rid of all of the detritus, which actually jet washed some of the fiberglass away as well, some of the less structurally sound bits of fiberglass got jet washed away as well. But I've got all that blasted out, so it's all nice and relatively clean inside there. And then lowered that over the chassis and basically just chopped out all the bits that were in the way, which was fairly simple, which is basically a widening of the transmission tunnel in the fiberglass shell. And that's then enabled us to drop that body onto the Sport Motive stretched modified TVR new build chassis. So that we can start to do that evaluation of the engineering of mating the two. So that was all pretty straightforward, and it does look pretty cool. It's a pretty cool glimpse of what's coming. Now, obviously, we're going to be widening the body. We're going to be not using this, but I hasten to add, for anybody new to this project, this body won't actually be used at all, other than quite a large proportion of it as a pattern to take a mould off. So we're just using this body, the original body, as a pattern. We'd weighed up whether to just machine the patterns completely from the CAD data. However, there were too many unresolved areas for us to be fully confident in doing it that way, and we decided it'd be better to use the original body as a pattern, add on where we need to add on to get the exterior surfaces the right shape, generally prepare the outer surface to be good enough to take a mould from, and then take a mould from this as a pattern, and KS Composites will be doing that part of the job. But that's the plan going forward. So yeah, I'm sure you'll agree, looks pretty cool, nice little step forward. I shall be back on it again as soon as I can, but again, I'm spinning quite a lot of plates at the minute, so there's going to be bits of progress on various things from my point of view. Moving on, Wasabi, and Bobby, as you can see, is making significant progress on that. He has finished off, I'll point at things over here, he's finished off and done a lovely job of the metal rust repair on the original Saab scuttle area, and he's done all of the prep for coating on the underside of that and on all of the other areas on this body that we can't get at once the body shell is fitted. So he's done an awful lot of coating, and I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Epoxy coating, masking up the areas where there's going to be welds, then epoxy coating the areas that are within the welded hollow sections that we can't coat afterwards, then unmasking those areas, and then overpainting with a weld through primer on all the areas where there's going to be welds, and just letting that go over the epoxy. That won't do any harm. So that's epoxied, and this a strip at the edge there and the edge there, I'll coat it in a weld through primer to enable the sill to be welded on. Inside of the sill is coated in epoxy, and then the welded areas which were masked during the epoxy have then been coated with a weld through primer, and then that lot is all then ready to fit. Obviously the same prep has been done to all of the flanges on the Saab, anywhere that's inaccessible. Bobby's just been going around doing a lot of detailed prep work. He's been in his zone doing a lot of detailed prep work, and he's pretty much there with that now. And he's now at the stage of actually connecting Saab to Audi and making it into Wasabi. And it's literally mid-progress. He's just having his lunch at the moment, but that is literally mid-progress. He was spot welding, doing a huge amount of spot welding yesterday, and I can see that the first plug welds joining Saab just above that wheel arch. You can see the smoke staining from the plug welds there. They are the first of the plug welds that are actually connecting Saab to Audi. So yeah, you're seeing it happen almost in live terms here, almost live. But that is now one vehicle. That is not coming apart. So hopefully we got it right. Because yeah, it's significant. Moving on from that, should I go into a bit more detail on that? I think we've covered the things there. I was just trying to weigh up the detail level to go into. I think we'll call that there. We're going to come through here now. Poor old Matt is working in the middle of the workshop, so his work area is a bit messy. That's largely because he's kind of being forced to do things in the middle of the workshop because we're a bit tight on space. Somebody wants to give us a new big workshop. That'd be great. But we're a bit short on space. Matt has been continuing. Last week we mentioned about this fabrication that he was doing in the back, which is now finished. This stowage area and transverse piece that he's added to the rear of the cockpit in the Jag. He's got that done. He's done the really quite tricky pieces of fabrication to accommodate the seatbelt inertia reels in the either end of that area in the reinforcer, which I mentioned last week, but he's now completed all that. And he's done the even trickier piece of fabrication, which we talked about again last week, but he hadn't started at that point, which is the reinforcement of the upper B pillar to enable the seatbelt mountings to be put into that area. And that was quite a big concern because it's not really strong enough, that area, for that load. So there's quite a lot of modification been done there, quite a lot of structure been added, and it's particularly difficult to access. It's quite fiddly. In hindsight, we might have done things in a different order there, but such is the way with effectively building prototype vehicles. You don't necessarily get everything in exactly the right order you intended because it's very easy to miss things. But we've got that reinforcement added into the pillar there. As I say, mentioned last week, he's reinforced the lower half of that pillar as well, and I'm satisfied now that that would withstand the requisite pull test and is strong enough. Right, as I said before, some of the rest of the car would not withstand modern safety tests, so it's a bit of a balancing act. But I want anything we add to be structurally sound to the best of my sort of engineering view, which that is now. So we're happy with that. Matt's then had to modify the hood frame, which he's done by the looks of things. I've missed that because I've been out of the workshop for a couple of hours. But he's modified the hood frame now to clear that because we had to do a tweak on that. One of the bits that made this fabrication particularly tricky was the fact that there's an extra nut inside here which stabilizes this hood bracket, and we decided it really did need it. Without it, it gets a bit bendy. We decided we did need to leave that there, and there wasn't really another place we could put that other than where it is, so it's had to stay there, which has made this extra bit of fabrication doubly difficult, but he's done it. He's also pocketed out in the lower parts of the inner quarter panels for the speakers. Got a little modification done there and got that all welded in. That's all nice, and as I say, got the seat belts fitted, got the seats fitted, just generally building up interior to the point where we can make sure that everything fits, everything works, we haven't missed anything, and all is good. So yeah, that's what Matt's on with, all looking particularly good. moving on from there, checking I've picked up the right coffee and not one that's full of grinding dust, we will come over here, and we have received, I'm going to put that down again, Stu is working on this on several fronts. Now we've got some complications on the front, which I will go into when we've solved them all. But we haven't solved them all yet, so I'm not going to go into them. But we are modifying the front suspension. We touched on it before, hit a couple of issues. So we're going to continue that at the point I've resolved them rather than midway through resolving them. But fortunately this morning, and finally, after being in a pickle with customs for, I believe, 2 weeks now, we've finally received the panels from Germany. The supplier in Germany, and I'm going to try and pronounce their name, and I've forgotten their name now. I will mention them next week when I can actually try and pronounce their names correctly, because I'm going to make a terrible hash of trying to say a German name if I try and say it off the top of my head, but we will mention them next week. Supplied the panels brilliantly, however UPS and customs jointly conspired to prevent them getting delivered to us for 2 weeks. Don't quite understand that when I can buy something from a country across 1,000 miles of sea and it get here in 3 days, why coming across the English Channel has to cause quite such a consternation. It's the same customs arrangement. I don't really understand why it should be any more difficult. You pay the duty, the parts arrive. It's not particularly technical, but here we go. The parts are now here, which is really good, because that gives Stu a huge scope to now move forward with the body shell work on this. And we will all be very happy to get the sill structures repaired, because the car is extremely weak as it is at the moment, and when it's very weak in the areas that are actually held to the jig, it does mean that you can make problems for yourself by pulling on bits of the car. Obviously, if the parts of the car that are attached to the sill clamps then collapse, the car moves, you've got problems. Now we've got it fixed in various other places. And interestingly, picking up on, and I've forgotten his name now, but the chap who emailed me talking about the chassis rails, interestingly, we actually found a dimensional problem earlier this week, which was that the offside chassis rail had actually come up at the back into the seat mount area. And interestingly, yeah, it just shows the dramatic weakness of that part of the car. It had been hit at the front, a moderate impact, I would say, not heavy. The chassis rail hadn't buckled anywhere, but it had basically done a seesaw, pivoted on the bottom of the bulkhead. The front of the chassis rail had gone down, the back had come up into the seat mounting box. Stu and I speculated on the force that it might need to put that back. Now Stu's taken the front off the car. Obviously, there's less holding the front in position. And we speculated it wouldn't be a lot. We were slightly concerned that if we put too much down pull on the back of the chassis rail to seesaw that back, we'll pull the sill into the chassis clamp, crushing the this side's a lot better, that side's extremely weak where it's held in the sill clamp. We were worried about crushing that. I pointed out if we put a support under the front of the rail, basically used a bottle jack, but there was no point rigging up the dozer properly. So we put a bottle jack under the front of the chassis rail with a block of wood, exerted a little bit of pressure on that, and then used a short mechanical puller that we've got to pull the back down. I thought it would be enough, and sure enough it was. I mean, literally with no hydraulic assistance, we could pull the back of that rail back down. So yes, incredibly weak. We will be resolving this by adding, as we mentioned before, an outrigger from the front of the sill into the chassis rail, and also we're going to beef up the mounting boxes for the seats where the chassis rail mounts underneath those, because they are a bit prone to bending upwards because they've not got a lot of stiffness in them. We're actually going to stiffen those up a little bit as well to prevent them bending upwards. So that's all good to go. But yeah, Stu now has a path ahead. I would sort of point at lots of panels. There's some sill parts here, but upstairs we have a vast pile of panels. It was an enormous delivery, and we have most of the parts we need to push ahead with the restoration work now. Stu's just walked back in from having his lunch, and I imagine he's, one description would be that he's raring to go at this, aren't you, Stu? Said he's raring to go now we've got some panels. The thing with Stu is he's seen all this sort of thing 100, if not 1,000 times before, and he's very used to it, and he's very good at it. And it's nice to get from a head scratching stage into probably more of a head scratching stage, but actually getting some panels on the car stage. And I know Stu's been eagerly awaiting the arrival of these, because they've taken quite a long time to get here. So yeah, it's all good. Stu's got a path ahead. E9's going to be moving forward. The owner's visited this morning. He's happy would be one term. He's generally happy. He's surprised by the quantity of rust, but then we always are. No great surprises there. But yeah, we'll soon have this looking far more shipshape, and he'll be much happier then. So that's all good. Aston Martin, nothing to report at the moment. There will be. However, again, that's a task that's kind of hinging on me checking some drawings, which I think I may have said last week. But I need to check the drawings for the chassis a final time. Cal's had a look at them. George has looked at them for an awfully long time because he's drawn them all. I need to have a look at them, make sure I'm happy with everything. If I am, then we can start getting laser cut parts done. And I need to get on with that. They need to get laser cut because we need to start the fabrication. Further to that, and hopefully either this afternoon, on next week's video, we'll have a nice shiny Select bench. We've got our other 2 Select benches under here, which look okay, bit rough around the edges, but our third one was particularly rough. It had been stored for quite a while in a damp container prior to us buying it, so it had a lot of rust on the surfaces of it, and we wanted to freshen it up. So that's gone over to the powder coaters that we use, who I can't recommend enough. BG Penny in Coventry, the company we use, Malcolm Penny, BG Penny in Coventry. In Exhall area of Coventry, absolutely exceptional business to use. They coat all of the ground-facing heavier parts of the vehicles that we build. So all of the suspension arms, axle casings, subframes, all of those sort of heavier pressings and heavier ground-facing parts, and wishbones and things as well in many cases. They're responsible for, when you see our finished cars, those usually black parts underneath, they have coated all of those, and those are shot blasted, zinc metal sprayed. They use an arc spray system to metal spray them and then powder coated, and that's all done at BG Penny's. Well, on the jig bench that they're currently coating for us, that's not as fancy as that. We're just having a basic shot blast powder coat, but they're masking off the top face so we don't have powder on that, so we can keep that as bare metal for bolting to. But that'll look nice and fresh then. And then we just need to speak to Select. So if Select are watching this, we don't ask for a lot in sponsorship, but would you fancy sending us some stickers so we can re-livery the MUF7 jig? This car will be built on. That's the next thing there. So if anybody from Select's watching, get in touch, because we could do with re-stickering that jig bench. So that would be good. And then gradually, as we go forward, I'd quite like to freshen up the other benches as well, because they're probably the foundation. Well, they are the foundation of basically every car we build here. Is one of these benches, one of the 3 Select MUF7 benches that we use. They're absolutely fundamental to what we do. We haven't got a very flat floor. We set those flats, and then everything's built off one of those. So we've got a datum that goes throughout the build process, so we don't lose any references while we're doing the engineering work. So fundamental to the job. Anyway, enough of that. Let's have a look in the body shop, and I think I'm going to hand over to Mark and let him take you through there.
All right, welcome back to another week. It looks like we haven't done much, but we have been soldering on. I've been doing other various things. There's like stuff in the pipeline, parts wise and stuff like that. So Gaz has been riding solo. So yeah, he's been doing little detail bits, last bit of sealer work here and there just to seal all the bits in. What else has he been doing? The wings, he's prepped the outside now ready. Inside's all raptored, sealed up. He started doing the little back panels over there. He's just doing 320 to 400 on them. And I'd like to say we do a sealer coat before we put the paint on. I think Gaz is painting this because I'm not going to have time. So it's about time we got back into painting, lazy git. Also, we had a little defect on the Jensen bonnet, weren't happy with it. There was just a little blemish in the drop coat. The drop coat is where I do the final drop coat of metallic. Just so you get a uniform, you have to drop the pressure down to about 1 to 1.5 bar. Come a lot higher like this, usually you're painting down here. But you do the drop coat, so it's just like an even metallic all over. But what happens, I think I had a pressure drop. We don't know where from, I found the gun do it. And it did like a splodge of metallic, which will happen if you don't have that consistent pressure. The gun died off. But it's rectified, mint now, ready to go back on the car. It's dusty from Gaz. I've flattered it to super mirror finish. So basically, not a lot to show this week because it's all the final detail bits. We can't keep getting Jamie to come in here where Gaz is live. Plus Gaz now, for 2 weeks, we're going to be very limited in here in the body shop because it's only him in there at the minute. He's gone to revisit his childhood memories of Mickey Mouse doing things to him. So it's going to be quite scarce now, body shop wise, till he gets back, because Steve's helping out on other things, I'm doing other things. So we'll be back soon. See you later.
Right, well, thank you, Mark, for that. And I think at that point, we've covered everything we need to cover in here. So I think it's time to hand over to Cal and let him take you through assembly shop and have a run down to the den. And see you in a week's time.
Right, thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to start with Project Churchill. I'm going to actually do a bit of a brief whistle stop and then actually dwell on the Escorts briefly. But Project Churchill, Luke has been doing a 3D print prototype of the trims that will run around the inside of the roof frame. So originally on these there's a wooden trim that runs all the way around above the interior windows, and it kind of finishes the edge of the headlining and goes down the A-pillar. But obviously everything's a different shape to standard, and actually the front one's fitted terribly anyway, so he's been just offering up a prototype of that to make sure that is good, and then we can carry on with those. Wiring. That is basically what's going on with both of these at the minute. An absolute frenzy of wiring, so I'm not going to go into massive detail on that. I think at the moment Steve has been building the first of the engine wiring harnesses, while Alex is measuring up for the front part of the chassis harness. So we've kind of done it modular. We've got the main PDM harness, which is all the stuff behind the dash, then there's the rear leg, there's I think 2 front legs, one down each side, and then the engine harness. So he's just doing the front legs at the minute, but we'll kind of come more into that when he's a bit further down the line. And then Project Kuma. So I was hoping to be testing this week, hence the alignment being done, but we're a little bit behind, as is the way with cars, because of the least expected thing. So we were spanner checking everything, and on the steering universal joint that links the downlink to the rack, we noticed that despite the fact the bolt was incredibly tight, the pinch bolt that holds the UJ onto the spline on the rack pinion, there was still a bit of play in it, and we were kind of scratching our heads a bit and figured it might just be that the UJ has been made out of tolerance, and we found an original Ford universal joint, and that is an absolutely perfect fit on the rack. So the conclusion we've come to is that it is indeed a mistoleranced joint. So we're waiting for another one to come. I think that's coming from Motorsport Tools, and then we'll get that on. But I thought I'd do a little whistle stop recap on this. I might do a full walk around this as a separate video when we've finished testing it. But I'll do just a quick demo of the custom parts, because at a glance this thing looks fairly standard. In reality, the only part, I think, of this that was on the donor car, apart from the shell, or some of the shell, is the window regulators. And I think the only parts that are standard Ford parts really are the glass and the seals. So starting at the back very quickly, boot lid is carbon fibre. We had the moulds done for this. We moulded that straight off an original boot lid. We machined the lock barrel housing for 2 reasons. 1, so it's an anodised finish so it doesn't chip, because we wanted it black, and 2, so we could use a brand newly available lock barrel in it. We machined the rear light inner housings so we could use a modern bulb holder with a decent connector on it. We machined the outer bezels so we could do them anodised, not painted. You've got the damper reservoirs here for the Nitron 3-way adjustables. It's struts on the back, as a fairly obvious point. This is independent rear suspension, our own design, runs a Sierra type diff in a cradle with Nitron struts. And then these are billet machined holders for those reservoirs, which we put in the boot so you can do the damper adjustment really easily. Moving along, all of the rear shelves custom. The covers over the strut tops are billet parts. The cage we've upholstered, and it's got 3D printed corner capping pieces so we could do a really nice job of upholstering the corners. The door handles, they're a replica of a Mark 1 handle, but they are completely machined because we wanted to do central locking on these, and originally all the key does is stop you from being able to press the button. So there's no moving parts to put an actuator on. So we used the late type Mark 1 Escort latch mechanism, which does have moving parts. Completely redesigned the door handle to have a moving mechanism with a crank on it, and all the lock mechanism on the driver's side one with a newly available lock barrel again. Also we could anodise it all, and we machined a little nylon bush that this sits in, so there's zero play in that button and it doesn't scratch because it's isolated from the surround. The lock pins are our own design and machined, as are the winders, the door release handles, the speaker grills, the bezels on the end of the door pulls. On the centre console, there's a tray you can put your phone in. It's got a USB port, the isolator, and I think the hazard switch down there. That's all machined from billet, as is the surround around the gear stick. The gear knob we designed, and it's got our own design PCB in it that has LEDs downlighting through little holes in the knob to basically puddle light the switches and the gear gate diagram so you can see them at night. Handbrake grips machined, all the dash is custom fabricated. The binnacle is a machined part with aftermarket, I think they're speed hook gauges. We designed and machined the pedal pads and the mirrors. So again, we CAD modelled these. They were machined in 3 parts, the bezel, the main part and the nose here. We've also chamfered the angle on these, so although this is adjustable, when this is adjusted to the driver's particular position, it all sits flush. We designed the bonnet hinges. They take little gas struts to open the carbon bonnet, which was also our own design. The outer of it was just a mould off a standard bonnet, but the inner we wanted to look a bit special, not just the sort of bent bit of metal they normally have. So we CAD modelled the inner and machined a full-size tool from epoxy tooling board to make the carbon inner, and then brought the inner and outer together, so the inner has a visual weave carbon with a satin lacquered finish. We designed and machined the screen wash tank and the brake fluid reservoir. Screen wash tank would be too small like this, so it feeds through to a fabricated tank in the footwell, which also acts as a passenger's footrest. We machined our own strut tops to use very, very high quality spherical bearings, so there's no play in there. The bezels around these reservoirs, which again, they're 3-way adjustable dampers, but we've put the reservoirs up through little ports in the inner wing so that we could have the adjusters easily available in the engine bay. We designed the dry sump tank. Several parts of that are billet, as is the cam cover, which hides away all the coil pack wiring. It's running fly-by-wire with a Motec ECU, Motec PDM. All of these little details at the front as well, so things like the bonnet, latch mechanism, and all the moving parts within that are our own design. So it's got a stainless steel latch running in nylon guides in there, so there's no parts to rust, no parts to sort of wear and then subsequently rust if you had a plated finish, for example. Also the bonnet safety surround and the corresponding hook on the underside of the bonnet, and the arches. So the arches are not the standard bubble arch shape. If you back up a little bit for a recap on that. Personally, I'm not keen on the original bubble arch look. It's right up here, and it's unnecessarily right up there because there's nowhere near that much wheel travel on an Escort. So we CAD designed a much more subtle arch design and then used that CAD model to machine full-size hammer form tools in epoxy. So basically the male pattern of that in a solid chunk of epoxy that the steel could then be hammer formed over, and then those steel sections grafted into the steel panels. So yeah, that's a whistle stop of some of the custom parts on this Escort. On that note of talking about a lot of design stuff, I'm going to hand over to George and Luke and see what they've been up to in the CAD den.
Hi guys, welcome to another day in the CAD catacombs. The CAD catacombs, because we have no windows here. Shorter update for me today. I've kind of been locked on one car, which is kind of rare over the last few months, but it's been kind of fun. One small job that I did right at the end of last week was the MG shifter rod. So they've just put a Trimac gearbox in that. I believe I'm saying that correctly. I'm sure the comments will let me know if I'm not. But that needed, I think there was a part which you could order from the US, which ended up costing more than just making one ourselves, and the one that we made ourselves has a few details which will help kind of neaten it up a little bit, a little recess for the gator to go over, etc, etc. So we're going to get that machine for the client. That will look mint in the car, along with the custom center console, which I don't know if I mentioned that in the last update, but we did a little scan of the car now that it's been stripped down, made the necessary edits to the center console based on the fact that due to the Trimac gearbox, the gear shifter location has changed slightly. Now that's ready for review, and then that in conjunction with the shift rod design that I've just done will kind of bring that whole area together. And then mainly I've been on with kind of overall E-type visualization. Over the last kind of few months, you've seen bits and bobs kind of come together in terms of the rear lights, a couple variations of like front intake designs, whether that was the splitter or the knacker ducts or whatever variation that was. And now we're kind of trying to put all those areas together, the mirrors too, into one render set, so we can show that to the client and kind of get him to sign off on the overall look of the car. So then we can go from iterative states to actually, you know, implementing shit. Can't say that word. Implementing stuff on the car itself. So that's kind of fun. I will send over to Jamie some renders to put into the video as well, so you guys can see that too. I think it's going to look stunning. I think this car is going to come out and it's going to be honestly a work of art when it's done. George has done a fantastic job of reimagining that rear end of that car, and I cannot wait to see that all being painted and whatnot. And then speaking of George, he's on with the E-Type AC stuff. Same with everything in the E-Type. A lot of stuff to fit into not a lot of space, and this in especially is ridiculous. I mean, you've got to fit a box in, and then within that area of the box you'll have one torsion bar going through one corner of it, you'll have the bulkhead then slicing through the back of it, and he's done a fantastic job of kind of squeezing that in a way which won't be hopefully too bad to then install, and yeah, will be very functionable. So I think that's it from us up here this week. Thanks guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, CAD Den. And speaking of Den, I'm going to go to the actual Den now and let's see what's going on down there. Welcome back to the Den, and I'm next to a car that quite honestly makes me feel a bit funny inside every time I see this. It's a car we built, I guess, it feels like about 2 years ago, but I reckon it was 2016 maybe, which scarily is 9 years ago. It could well be 9 years ago, and it was probably one of our first more ambitious builds in terms of it being quite a big and complicated car, a bit of a move into more luxury cars rather than the sort of more stripped out cars we'd been doing up to that point. But it looks so good. Like every time I see this, and I haven't seen it for a while, I just remember how good it looks. And I think the changes we did on the rear arches and the stance we got with it and the rear quarterback, it's all quite subtle stuff, but it just all comes together, and I say it's such a cool car. So this has actually recently changed hands, and it's come here just for a bit of a check over, basically make sure everything's okay with it, get it ready for use. So yeah, really excited to have that back in front of us. And then I'm going to wander out into the sun here. And another incredibly cool car which has just arrived. So if you remember right at the back of when we'd started the Den, one of the first cars we had here was a Jaguar XJR, an X308 XJR, which had come all the way from Spain, and this is the same customer, so she was super happy with all the work we'd done on the Jag, and this is the next car for us to work our magic on. So as you can see, it's a 500 SEC. Blooming expensive car back in the day, and you can probably see why. The level of detail and complexity on it is off the charts, really. Having worked on Mercedes of this era before, when you get into them, they seem to use 10 components for every other manufacturer's one, which in some cases is incredibly impressive, in some cases is a bit irritating sometimes. But yeah, what a cool thing. And we're going to be getting this in for inspection, going through everything on it, doing whatever it needs mechanically. Might do a few little choice upgrades. I think we're going to do a nice in-car entertainment system in it. It actually has possibly the coolest stereo in the world in it at the minute. It's got this Becker stereo that motorizes in and has a little flap in front of it, so when you turn the car off it doesn't look like there's a stereo, it looks like a little cubby hole, I guess for anti-theft reasons. Back in the day when people actually bothered stealing stereos out of cars, then you key it on and it slides out. It's very cool, but from a practicality point of view, not so great. So I think CarPlay will be going into this, and no doubt a whole host of other little details. So we'll keep you posted on that one. Right, let's have a wander inside. Doo-doo. Okay, so a variety of news in here. Actually, a bit of news from today is some of you may have noticed that the Dino seemed to have paused slightly, and that was because the guy we were doing this for was starting to wonder whether it would actually be worth going the whole hog and essentially it becoming a retro power project, bare shelling it and basically building a full Restomod Fiat Dino. And he came in today. It's the first time he's been in the country for quite a while, and he was able to have a look around this and a chat with us, and has decided to do exactly that. So don't know the exact date yet, but keep your eyes peeled for a Fiat Dino at some point making its way into the Retro Power workshop, which is very exciting. In the meantime, MGB is all hands on deck, getting it all back together. So engine and box are all now in. Luke's done his magic on the transmission tunnel to get the shifter hole back to how it should be for that shifter. Luke has now been able to carry on with this 3D modelling, which he may have talked about, I'm not sure, on the centre console for this, so we can press ahead with the final designs and printing that centre console and then leathering it. We've also designed a custom shifter for this, and that was a request. I think I mentioned it last week. I do remember, in fact, mentioning this chap's sentimental knob last week. So we have now designed a shift lever for that knob, and that is being machined by Andy at Concept 303 at the moment. And Richard will tell you in a minute what he's up to in terms of the interior on that. Right, so that's the MG. Barchetta, we've pretty much wrapped that up. We've just got to do the paintwork on the little 3D printed panel we did for the heated seat switches. And then we're also just discussing some other paintwork tasks on the car at the minute. There's a couple of very, very minor little bubbly bits on it, and we're debating, or we're going to have a discussion with the customer over whether it's worth doing the paintwork, because it's quite an interesting construction, this car. In fact, I'll stick this light on briefly. In that a lot of the panels are all effectively merged together. It's more like you would expect to see on a very old car from the 60s, like an E-Type, where there's lots of joints and they've been leaded over. And on this, like, the wing joins all the way around the front, all the way into the other wing, and more or less the same at the back. The whole rear end is almost one piece, which means that if we're going to do a small amount of paint work, we're going to have to re-lacquer an enormous amount of the car, essentially. And it's only really a few little bits on the rear arches and one tiny little blister at the front here. But to tackle that properly to a good standard means stripping a lot of parts off the car and re-lacquering all of the front end and all of the rear end. So we're just going to have a discussion with the customer about the costs involved with that and whether it's worth it and whether it's likely to get much worse in the near future. So that's that. Richard will show you where he's at with the SL interior in just a moment. And then Luke, it's interior stuff all around at the minute. Luke's on with the Recaros in this. So audio fitment's all done. We've got the intake manifold and cam cover blasted up at Retro Power and Cerakoted. They're back in the car. And we're just looking at the last job really on the interior, which is to get these very cool 90s Recaros that the customer supplied tidied up and fitted in the car. But yeah, we're kind of on the homeward stretch on this now, so very much looking forward to that coming together, and very much looking forward to seeing it detailed, because it's been relatively dirty since the first time I saw it, but I absolutely love it. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that final touch. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Richard and see what he's been up to.
Okay, how's it, everybody? Good to be back. So if Jamie can get this in, there's the two front seats for the SL500. They come out very nice. I've been getting a lot of comments on that, so very happy about that. I'm just waiting for Alex to come and extend the new heater pads and put the original connectors on for me, because he'll do it properly. I won't. And then these can go in the car, but I have parked this for a little bit, and I just jumped for a minute onto it. It's good to take a break every now and then from certain things as well. And I jumped back onto the Allegro. So Jamie's got some shots, so you'll see here's some patterns that I made. He's got me patterning. How I did this was, so I did it differently, a little bit different. Some of them I used the plastic, so that's the big piece that simply just wraps around, and I could easily get it in its place, no problem. But this is like the little recess border for like the storage compartment in the dash. So I couldn't get the plastic to sit, so I just kept on masking tape, and you do 1 or 2, 3 layers, and then you're able to cut it exactly where you want it, and then peel it off, and then the masking tape doesn't stretch. And you just got to be careful. You stick that on your pattern paper, you add your seams. a lot of nick marks because we use split leather. Reason why I've put extra nick marks in is, again, I don't know if some of you can remember, I sew from notch to notch or nick to nick, and that works, because if I simply sew from this whole area, the machine will stretch it out. But if I just keep lining these up, smaller the area, and then the leather won't stretch, because I'm sewing from there to there rather than from there to there. So that came out really cool. Jamie will get, so I've managed to make the pattern, cut it in a section, make another little sample. I had to work out what size needle. Believe it or not, there's 1,000 different types of sewing needles. There's ballpoint needles, sharp point needles, LR needles, L needles, LZ needles, and it's all about how sharp the needle is, how round the point is. Like for instance, when you're sewing material, you want a round point because the needle needs to go in between the yarns. You don't want a sharp leather point because that will cut the yarns and then the material can start fraying. So, but anyways, this is just leather. That's just two different types. So I really just concentrated on the thickness of the leather. So what I wanted to do, because it's thin leather, the rule of thumb is use the thinnest possible needle with the thickest possible thread, and by what it is, then you've got a small hole and the thread really fills the hole. And with the thin split leather, you can very easily see the edges where that needle has punctured the leather at the top. So when we pull it tight, you can see these little cut marks, and I think I got it right. So I'll be able to pull that, and it's just going to be a really nice clean seam. So I'm excited to fit it. But other than that, I've been on with the steering wheel because I thought, let me get some stuff ready and then I can spend a day or two just fitting, get some nice tunes going and get my groove on. So this is the Allegro steering wheel. I've bonded the two pieces on. There was a little bit of fettling just to get it because there's a bit of build up with the anodizing, and then I put a bit of a wood sealer on, and so I just had to sand it out on the inside just to get it to butt up nicely, and then just a quick sand. I had it bonded overnight, so that came out nice. And now I have made the first sort of one that goes on, and this one, the leather stretched here and there, and then I thought, oh, let me get another piece of leather because now I need to work out the stitch lengths, because this will have two little stitches with the sewing machine on either side, and then I'm just going to lace it. So some refer to the type of stitch that I'm going to do to the Euro stitch, because I'm just, you know, sort of stringing it through the leather, and where it goes into the leather and out. If you understand what I mean, some refer to that as a baseball stitch, but we're going to be doing the Euro stitch. So, so now it's just checking that my width of my leather is sufficient to wrap around. It can't be too loose, it can't be too tight. The stitch length needs to be a certain size, because when we start lacing it, you want those nice little, it almost makes like a hexagon, that type of shape if you stitch it correctly and you line them up. And then also the distance that the stitch is from the edge. So I did a quick sample. I used my little special foot that's got a guide exactly 4 millimeters. So I'm going to go 4 millimeters from the side. That'll make an 8 millimeter overall, and then just squeezing as I lace it in and I start putting a bit of tension on it, probably pull it to about 6 millimeters. So I think that would be a nice size and proportion with the wheel and everything. I'm going to go and try and get sort of those size shapes. So I might be skipping every second stitch, and that will give us a little bit of an elongated sort of circle that will mimic this, hopefully. So look at me trying to be clever over here. So we'll see how that goes in a day or two. So, but so far so good. Oh yeah, one thing that we tested as well, where we said we've got this little 12 o'clock over here, and we said, like, okay, we want to put an accent strip in there. And then this specific car has got the Harris tweed, and what happens is, in these areas, I need to trim that seam down to 3 millimeters. So on the leather, it's fine, because then what happens is it goes and sits in there. I'll show you with the leather bit. It just sits nicer, and that's exactly 3 millimeters. No more, no less. That's just the right amount, and it will just go and it will be a smooth finish. But because the Harris tweed can fray, I cut it to 3mm, put it there, and I just tugged a little bit, and unfortunately that is pulling loose. So this is a no-no. We're not going to risk it, because even if you just put your hand there, that might just rub that out. So we're not going to take a chance. It would have looked nice, but we're just going to go for plain leather. You're still going to be able to see your 12 o'clock, and it will still look classy. And more importantly, when you're driving like that, as we all do, it needs to feel nice on your hand, so it's going to be nice and level. The little two seams won't protrude onto your hand, so it's going to be really comfortable to hold it. So yes, that is where I am at the moment. So in a few, next week, hopefully you'll see a trimmed steering wheel and a trimmed dash. I'll see you guys later.
Right, thank you very much, Richard. That's it for this week, and we'll see you again next week.